Our text this morning comes from the Old Testament book of Joshua, Joshua chapter 1. I'll be reading verses 3 through 9 from the New Living Translation. I promise you what I promised Moses. Wherever you set foot, you will be on land I have given you, from the Negev wilderness in the south to the Lebanon mountains in the north, from the Euphrates River in the east to the Mediterranean Sea in the west, including all the land of the Hittites. No one will be able to stand against you as long as you live. As I was with Moses, so I will be with you. I will not fail you or abandon you. Be strong and courageous, for you are the one who will lead these people to possess all the land I swore to their ancestors I would give them. Be strong and very courageous. Be careful to obey all the instructions Moses gave you. Do not deviate from them, turning neither to the right or to the left. Then you will be successful in everything you do. Study this book of instruction continually. Meditate on it day and night, so that you will be careful to do and obey everything written in it. Only then will you prosper and succeed in all you do. This is my command. Be strong and courageous. Do not be afraid or discouraged, for the Lord your God is with you wherever you go. For the Lord your God is with you wherever you go. We ask your prayers on this sermonic thought, standing on the promises, or as I was with Moses. The people of God are embarking upon a journey from one stage of life in history to the next. They are going from 430 years of bondage in Egypt to 40 years of wandering in the wilderness and going into a land that God had promised. After decades of oppression and struggle and despair, they are about to enter into a new season. They are going from where they are to where God is trying to take them. Moses, the leader, is dead. But fortunately for them, the promise that God made for them did not die in the wilderness with Moses. Moses is dead, but the promise God had given did not die in the wilderness with Moses. So the Lord appointed and anointed a new leader named Joshua to take the second generation of the Israelites into a land of purpose and promise that the Lord had promised them. And it is in these opening verses that the Lord gives the people a pattern for how his plan for their lives will come to pass. In these verses, God is trying to tell them how his plan for their lives will come to pass. God reminds them of his name and his nature, and that he is a promise keeper. The God that we serve is a God that does not lie, but God is a God that keeps every promise that he makes. He wants them to know that the same promise he made to the ancestors Abraham over 400 years ago was a promise that still he plans to keep to this day. The land God said he would give them, and the wealth he said he would give them, and the way he said that he would make for them, and the enemies that he would stop and block for them is a promise that they can stand on. Even though it had been a long time, and even though the people had gone through a lot, God would be true to his word, and they could stand on God's promise. And it is assurance for us today that the promise that God made back then is God's assurance for us today. The promise God made to deliver, to heal, to bless, to prosper, to promote, and to lift you is still good today. Let me say that one more time. God says that you have a promise with your name on it. And that promise is to be blessed. God's promise is to be healed. God's promise is to be delivered. God's promise is for you to be promoted. God's promise is for you to be provided for, protected, shielded, guarded, and directed. And it is a promise that still stands today. You can stand on the fact that God is going to always be true to his word and bring you through any season of uncertainty. You can stand on the fact that God will always do what God said he would do, and God will keep you even when you can't keep yourself. And that's good news for somebody today. God says that when your connections and when your affiliations and when your membership and your title and your job can't keep you, God says that when you can't keep yourself, I will keep you, and you can stand on his promise. And the truth is that we all know what it's like to go through a season of darkness. We all know what it's like to go through a season of difficulty. We all know what it's like to go through a season of doubt and disappointment. And God says that when you are going through a season of discouragement, God says, I will not fail you. We all know what it's like to have had a relationship that did not work out. Anybody in here that hadn't been in a relationship that is of age that did? Okay. We all know what it's like to lose some of the money that we have made. We know what it's like to have dreams deferred and people we trusted to walk out on us. But the good news is that you are still here today. God made a promise to your ancestors before you were even born, so you can stand on the promise that God made way back in the book of Genesis. So who is the Moses in your life? God made this promise to Moses. Who is the Moses in your life? Is it your grandmother? Was it your great-great-grandfather? He made a promise to the people in your lineage, and where you are today is because God made a promise to our ancestors, and we can stand on the promise of God. And can I tell you that God is going to surpass what he has done? Where you are going doesn't compare to where you have been. Y'all know we're in a new era. We're in a new season, and everything the enemy is trying to do to take away from you, God wants me to declare that you will get it back. Because even in these contentious times, you can still get your joy back. Even in these times, you can still get your peace back. You can still get your sanity back. Don't think about committing suicide. I heard on the news somebody was calling in on the suicide hotline because things got so heavy they couldn't deal with it. God is with you, and there's no sense. If God is with you, ain't no sense in you losing your sanity over what's going on in the White House. And so God gives them guidance on how they can stand on the promises of God. Verse 5 says, as I was with Moses, I will be with you. I will never leave you nor forsake you. That's the good news, because what will help us to navigate this season of our lives is to stand firmly and unshakable in the days ahead. And so the text tells us that in order to make it, you've got to consider what God has already done. God has an awesome curriculum vitae. God has a dynamic resume. And so the Lord wants Joshua to be mindful of God's credentials. God wanted Joshua to be reminded of God's qualifications and God's track record of bringing his people through and bringing his people out in some difficult days. He says, as I was with Moses. And in order to make it through the journey ahead, every now and then, church, we need to stop and reflect on God. Making it through this season to the next is going to require us to remember the qualifications of God. We got to remember what's on God's resume. And we got to remember that God, the things that God has already done in our lives. God didn't have to list them out for Joshua because Joshua was there when God moved. God did not have to spell out for Joshua what he did because Joshua was there when he shielded the Israelites in the time of distress. Joshua was there, Lord have mercy, and he saw firsthand the ways that God had made. Joshua had firsthand knowledge of the doors that God would open and the mountains that God would move. Joshua was there when God provided the quail from heaven and the manna in the wilderness. Joshua had firsthand knowledge of the battles that God fought and won on behalf of his people. And all Joshua had to do was go back in the recesses of his mind, to go back to God's resume and remind himself of the things that God has already done. And God is not ever slack in his promise. What he did back then, God is able to do even more today. So Joshua was there when Moses came down from the mountain with the 2 tablets with the 10 commandments of God. Joshua saw how God delivered Israel from the 10 plagues. Joshua was right there. Joshua was there when God told Moses to stretch out his hand and he saw the waters of the Red Sea parted. Joshua was there when he saw after the sea was parted, there was mountains on one side and mountains on the other side, and Pharaoh and his 600 chariots were behind him. But Joshua saw that as they were walking through the Red Sea, they saw the salvation of the Lord. Joshua saw how God delivered them from being destroyed by the army of the enemy. There is an army that's trying to destroy us. But can I tell you, you've got to be reminded that just like Joshua was there at the Red Sea, many of us have been at a Red Sea, and we've got to be reminded that God can open up the Red Sea and allow our way to be made smooth. And when the enemy starts progressing upon us, God will close up the Red Sea. And the enemy will be no more. Joshua saw how God delivered them from being destroyed by the army of the enemy. And God was asking Joshua to press the rewind button in his mind and to consider the things that God had already done. And see, that's the problem. We forget what God does. We can't even remember everything God does. But sometimes we have to play the rewind. My therapist. Oh, did I tell y'all I do see a therapist? You cannot pastor a church and not have a therapist. You just can't do it. You can't do it. You can't make it. I got Jesus, but I got a therapist too. And you can judge me all you want, but while you sitting there judging, you might need to go get a therapist yourself. Session with her last week, she was reminding me of some things. She was causing me to look at my life and how things have transpired to this point. She wanted me to go back and look at some things and how things were done. I don't want to go back. She's like, Etoria, you need to go back and you need to process. I don't want to do that. You need to go back and look at some things that have happened in your life and process it, how you got through it, what you did to get through it, because the thing that you're facing ahead, that's gonna be confirmation on how you get through it. I can't get no help in here. Y'all might need my therapist. I got her name and number in case you. There are some people, Lord have mercy, in this walk that you cannot trust because you don't know them. But then there are some people who you can't trust because you do know them. But you can trust God because you know God. That's if you have a personal relationship with God. You can trust God. As I was with Moses, you got to get in touch with that. As I was with. As I was with your mother and father. And as I was writing this, I was reminded of my father. I saw him pray every night on his knees by the bed. As I was with your father, Etoria, I am with you. As he knelt by the bedside every night and prayed, I was with him. And as you kneel, well, you can't kneel now, but as you sit on your sofa, don't judge me, because I can't get on my knees. Some of y'all can't get on your knees. As I was with him, I am with you. As I was with your grandparents, your grandfather taught you God first, then money. As I was with Theodore Wade, I am also with you. As I was with your ancestors, I am also with you. You already have the evidence in your life, and you have to remind yourself that as you are moving forward, every now and then, you've got to look back in the rearview mirror of your life and remember what God has already done. Remember when your child was sick and God healed your child. Remember how God protected you in that accident. Remember when God healed you. Remember how God brought you through that difficult situation. Do you know what to do? Lord have mercy. Did you know what to do? No, but God worked it out because God is never slack on his promise. And trust is the glue of life. Trust is the foundational principle that holds all relationships together. And I want you to think about somebody in your life that you can trust. Let's go ahead and think. I know we don't like to think because we want the pastor to keep talking and talking and talking, and we still don't. Think about somebody you can trust. Just take a second. Who can you trust? Who is it? Don't look down your row. Who is that person you can trust? And why is it that you trust that person? Why do you trust that person? You have an image of that person in your mind? Why do you trust that person? The simple answer is because they have proven themselves to be trustworthy. People we trust have earned our trust by their consistency in our lives, by our love, by their care and their nurture. We trust the person that we have in our mind because they have been reliable, dependable, and consistent. And God is saying that when you look back on what I did for Moses, you can trust that I will do the same for you as I was with Moses. That's the Lord's resume. And everybody needs to have an as I was with kind of moment with God, because then it helps you to rest in the Lord's peace and comfort. As I was with Moses, so I will be with you. God told Joshua that he was going to be with him wherever he goes. And what I like about the text is that God guaranteed that he will be present with Joshua and he will provide for Joshua. It is a statement of affirmation and encouragement, because knowing that God is with you is perhaps the most important thing you can have in your life. I know you think the most important thing is your house. You think the most important thing is your money and your car. You think the most important things are the clothes in your closet and all your possessions, but the most important thing is to know that God is with you. When you know that God is with you, you know that there is victory on the other side. God told Moses in chapter 3, verse 12, I will be with you. God said in Deuteronomy chapter 31, verses 6 through 8, be strong and courageous. Do not fear. Don't be scared, for the Lord will lead you and God will be with you. God will not fail you and God will not abandon you. So don't be discouraged and don't be afraid. In Isaiah 41:10, he says, fear not, for I am with you. I will help you. I will uphold you with my righteous hand. And in Matthew 28:20, he told the disciples as he had ascended into heaven, lo, I am with you always, even until the end of the world. I got one assignment today, and that is to let everybody know in here and online that God is with you. When you're going through a storm, God wants me to tell you, God is with you. When you are struggling, young people, with that test in school, God is with you. When you are trying to understand and figure out the situation, God is with you. When you are struggling on your job or you have lost your job, God is with you. He promises to be with you in difficult times. He promises to be with you when you are depressed and distressed and disappointed and disheartened. God is with you when you have doubts. God is with you when you are discouraged. And although it took a minute for this promise to come to pass, Joshua is still standing. Joshua is still living. Joshua is still breathing. Joshua is still pushing. Joshua is still surviving. Joshua is still thriving. And Joshua is still hoping. He could have given up, but instead he said a promise delayed is not a promise denied. He realized that it hadn't happened yet, but he knew that the problem wasn't that God wasn't gonna do it. It's just that God hadn't done it yet. It ain't that God ain't gonna do it. It's just he ain't done it yet. Is there anybody in here that can say, I got some problems and I got some issues and I know God will do it. He just ain't done it yet. As a matter of fact, he's already worked that thing out. God ain't sitting around figuring it out. He's already worked it out. It's just got to manifest. But until it manifests, you got to stand. Yeah. You can't see it, but the answer's on the way. The provision is on the way. And I don't know about you, but I thank God that God is with me in the good times and God is with me in the bad times. God is with me when I'm up and God is with me when I'm down. God is with me when I'm sick and God is with me when I'm well. As I was with Moses, so will I be with you. You got to stand on the promise that God will be with you. God will not fail you. God is the same yesterday, today, and forever. When things get difficult, stand on his promise. When storm clouds rise, stand on his promise. When everything is breaking loose and breaking down and breaking out, stand on his promise. And then verse 8 says, study this book of instruction. Some of you didn't get it. Study study this book of instruction. Meditate on it day and night so that you will be sure to obey everything that is written. Meditate it so you can stand on everything that is written. Study this book. And then verse 9, as they say, I'm done because I'm tired. Verse 9 says, this is the command. Be strong and courageous. Don't be scared. Don't be discouraged, for the Lord your God is with you wherever you go. Now, I'm old school. I grew up in the church. I grew up with hymns. I know some of y'all don't like hymns, but maybe you don't understand hymns. But I was reminded of a hymn our foreparents sang. I've seen the lightning flashing. I've heard the thunder roll. I felt sin's breakers dashing, trying to conquer my soul. But I heard the voice of Jesus telling me still to fight on, because he promised never to leave me. Woo! Never to leave me alone. As I was with Moses, so shall I be with you, standing on the promises of God, because God will keep his promise. Amen.
This has been the First A.M.E. Church Manassas broadcast of our Sunday morning worship service. We are so excited and honored that you chose to be a part of our extended E family, and pray that you have been truly blessed by today's powerful message. However, please know that you are always welcome and encouraged to join us in person every Sunday at 10 o'clock a.m. right here at 10313 South Grant Avenue in Manassas, Virginia. Otherwise, join us again virtually next Sunday at 10 a.m. on our live stream broadcast, or anytime after that at www.famechurch.com. Or you can find us on Facebook and YouTube just by searching at First A.M.E. Church Manassas. We also ask that you continue to support this ministry with your generous tithes and offerings through PushPay by texting Fame Church to 77977. You can give online at famechurch.com/giving, or just mail your contribution to First A.M.E. Church Manassas, 10313 South Grant Avenue, Manassas, Virginia, 20110. Once again, thank you for joining us today for the First A.M.E. Church Manassas Sunday morning worship service. Reverend Dr. Etoria V. Goggins, pastor. Loving like Christ, living like Christ, leading like Christ. Be blessed.